Hello, gorgeous soul friends. Welcome to my channel, Madame DeVaux. Thank you so much for tuning in and for allowing me into your wondrous experience today. So I know my voice sounds a little bit raspy right now. I did have an incident with dry drowning yesterday. I pulled a bunch of water into the wrong pipe and I was like choking, and it was like the worst thing ever. But I was like coughing all night and it was just terrible. So my voice is a little shot from that, but I'm fine. I went to the urgent care this morning. They checked for liquid in my lungs. They did x-rays, they listened with the stethoscope and everything, and I'm okay. I don't have any infections or anything like that, so that's great. But I am dealing with the after effects of the coughing, so that will, be influencing this video. There is a little thing that my voice has been doing where it kind of cuts off in the middle of words, so if that happens, just know that's why. But I know I've been gone. It's been a little while, so it's good to be back. It's good to be back and present with you guys. I've, been taking this break from YouTube, and, through this break, I've been generating all of these ideas for content and stuff like that. So I will be putting out pretty consistent content over the course of the next few months because I just have so many ideas and I have so many videos planned for you guys. But this one in particular, I've actually been planning since August, and it's currently November. So it's been a little bit that I've been working on this video. I did lag on this video in particular because I just wanted to give you guys the most compelling information, the most accurate information. There's a lot of information on this subject that we're going to talk about today, and I just wanted my research to be as thorough as possible. And sometimes it takes time, right? Lots of books that I've been reading, and it's taken me a little while to finish those books, so I didn't want to put this video out until I finished a couple of books that were actually in relation to this topic. So I finally finished those books. I finally finished my research on this topic for this video. Of course, the research is always endless, right? But for this particular video, I finally feel that it's right, because that's something that I am very passionate about, is like making sure that the videos that I give you guys are accurate and resonant. Most importantly, like I don't want to be putting things out that I feel like still needs work. I've been desperately wanting to make a video on this topic that's commonly taught in mystery schools. This idea that this rock that you're hanging out on is more than just a rock and is actually an ancient life form that, like you, is ever evolving, and that maybe you yourself are just a microbial being living on a giant body that's very much alive and aware of your existence. The same way your body in and of itself is its own world with all kinds of microbiomes and tiny life forms that are working around the clock to keep you alive and healthy. As above, so below. We are simply reflecting this same process within our own bodies. We're just a reflection of our star system. And, your body, life around you, and all of the planets are really just different variants of the same base material. We're specifically reflecting the light of our sun. Our sun is a hydrogen star with one proton, the feminine, and one electron, the masculine, which is why we mate one-on-one, because we are replicating this process of hydrogen, the process that's present within our sun. And this is why the ancient Egyptians worshipped the sun god, Ra, and considered him the ultimate master. And even the ancient Romans worshiped the planets as well, for a reason. And there's a reason that astrologers throughout time have looked to the sky for guidance, because the planets are their own spheres of consciousness. And they're commonly known as planetary bodies. If you've studied esoterica and mystery school teachings before, you probably already know this, but they're commonly referred to as planetary bodies. And just like you yourself are your own archetype, these planets also have their own unique personalities that influence your everyday experience because they're so fucking massive. And their consciousness directly influences Earth and our experience here on Earth because of that. Kind of like when you surround yourself with a certain group of people and their energies begin to manifest in your own life as thoughts, experiences, and emotions. As they say, you are a compilation of the closest people you associate with. It's the same concept with the planets revolving around one another, which is why the inner planets have more of a direct effect on the individual everyday experience, because they're so much closer to us, so they're affecting us on the day-to-day, versus the outer planets, which have a long-term, sometimes multi-generational expression. And it's because of this that astrology is such an effective tool in navigating the Earth experience. And I say navigate, not predict, because ultimately it's your will that determines your destiny. And I talk about that in my tarot addiction video. If you haven't watched it already, I really recommend it. especially if you're somebody who struggles with divination addiction. But these planets do have a pretty big effect on our lives. So having an understanding of their energies can help you consciously work with them to enhance your projected experience. So once again, it doesn't predict, it's simply a tool to enhance your experience, to assist you in your Earth experience. And the same way that our planet has changed in state over the course of its existence, the density of our physical form also changes. The bodies who have chosen the path of ascension are currently becoming less and less dense as we raise our consciousness, which is why light, wholesome, plant-based diets are so popular in the conscious community. Because as you tune your awareness to these higher states of being, your body is not really able to support a lot of these heavier, denser, processed foods. So you may even find that you become very food sensitive after awakening. It's not uncommon for people to develop things like celiac disease, GI issues, IBS, all of that stuff. And even the book, the Celestine prophecy, which is a fictional book, but it's rooted in a lot of esoteric truth, it talks about how the people who lessen their consumption of meat are able to better perceive the energy realms. And before you meat lovers go talking shit in my comments, give me a second to explain. Because there's actually a reason for this, and I'll get into that in just a bit. So once upon a time, we were beings whose makeup was not as dense as it is today. Our physical makeup was much less dense, and it resembled something more of like similar to a plant, because plants have a different cell structure, right? So they're naturally less dense than our animal structure. And because of this less dense physical form, we were able to better perceive the energy realms and maintain a closer connection to source, even while in physical form. So there wasn't this forgetting process like there is when we incarnate today. And according to mystery schools, our bodies were actually gelatinous and plant-like at one point. And there are aspects of this vegetable form that are still retained within this physical animal body, such as the sympathetic nervous system, which strangely resembles a tree when it's removed from the body and stood up. And it's even been referred to as a gift from the vegetable kingdom to the physical body of man. Countless religious and spiritual teachings across the globe have revolved around the energies that flow within this vegetable remnant, including the ancient Egyptian practice of anking life force energy up the spine, as well as the Eastern religion's teachings of the main chakra system, which is also located along the spine and manifests as each individual organ that's affiliated with the chakras. So the center of our ancient vegetable component, the part that fed on light waves, manifests now in the physical body as the solar plexus, because it remains from an era controlled by the sun. And the solar plexus also manifests, ironically, as digestive organs, right? Like if you've studied chakras and you've studied Eastern medicine, you know that the solar plexus is a manifestation of the digestive tract, right? Which breaks down and processes fuel for the body. So ancient mystery schools teach that the solar plexus was actually the part of our plant form which broke down glucose from light and turned it into fuel. And it now manifests as our digestive organ, which also breaks down food and turns it into fuel. So science is also beginning to recognize the importance of gut health, and it's even being referred to as the second brain. And it's not even just important for physical health, but mental health as well. So I think that's something that's really important to keep in mind when looking into this information, because it all kind of ties in. If you really do your research, this is everywhere. You can find this information subtly in a lot of different things regarding medicine and the human body, and physiology and all of that stuff. So segueing back into the topic of a plant-based diet. So I'm sure you're well aware of the saying, you are what you eat. And there's a reason that plant-based diets are so popular amongst the conscious community, because they're literally bringing us closer to this ancient vegetable consciousness. Your body is creating cells based off of what you eat and what you consume. So when you're consuming more plant-based products, your cells are creating themselves. I want to say it's like, I don't know how long the cycle is for your body to completely have a new, I think it's 7 years or something like that. I'm not sure. But every time you eat something consistently, your body is replicating itself and recreating itself based on those things that you're consuming. Whenever you're regularly consuming a plant-based diet, your body is literally being brought closer to this ancient vegetable form. And it's extremely common to feel an inherent calling to lessen or even stop the consumption of meat entirely after spiritual awakening. And I think this is kind of why we're also seeing plant-based diets become so popular and trendy within the mainstream, because the masses are also beginning to integrate these higher density energies, even if they don't have any idea of what's going on. And personally, I myself don't agree with current meat farming methods, but I honestly also think forceful veganism is a little extreme, I will say. And it really isn't even necessary, because people are progressively making the jump to these more conscious lifestyles themselves. And you know, the meat and dairy industries are both on the decline. So forcing an ideology on anyone just often pushes them further away and kind of makes them resentful towards the ideology in particular. So, you know, as I discuss in my New Age spirituality video, humans don't respond well to force. We don't respond well to forceful action. And, you know, we're really not meant to be controlled. So ideally, I personally think if you're going to consume meat, you know, just try to do it as conscious as possible. Ideally, I think the most conscious way to consume meat is through indigenous style hunting, where the whole of the animal is blessed and honored. But I'll make a separate video on this topic, because I really don't agree with forceful veganism. You know, there's a lot of people out there who say, like, if you're not vegan, you're not spiritual, which is complete bullshit, because, like, what are you going to tell these native indigenous communities, that they're not spiritual? Like, it's a lot of, you know, westernization of these concepts and people becoming very ego-based and all of that shit. But back to the vegetable body. Let's continue. That's a topic for a whole other video. Awareness of the vegetable body has remained most present in Chinese medicine. You know, qi, the delicate energy that animates all living things, can become blocked and manifest as disease, injury, and misfortune. And this is what holistic practitioners are working to balance when they're practicing things like Reiki and, you know, acupuncture and all of that stuff. So texts such as the Bible even refer to this vegetative time period with its famous Garden of Eden. And even though there are no artifacts that have survived this proto-human era, or at least not that we know of, there are a lot of reliable records and accounts of these artifacts. Most of this information was likely destroyed with the decimation of the Library of Alexandria, as well as other attempts to keep this knowledge under wraps as a control tactic. You know, because even the word itself, the etymology, history, right? The story of humanity is something that can easily be manipulated by those who document the tale. So up until very recently, most of that tale was told and written by the Catholic Church. Back in the medieval times, people didn't have education. People didn't have free thought. They would go to a priest, and that's where they would receive all of their information. They would go to a clergyman, and that's where they would receive all of their knowledge. Now it's scientism that's kind of taken over in terms of telling us what is right and wrong to believe. And ultimately, this radical way of thinking is just a byproduct of the Catholic Church's reign. It's kind of pushed humanity to this other extreme where we've become so traumatized by religious indoctrination. It's pushed people to the point where a lot of people completely reject all that is spiritual and claim that all things not proven by our limited means of understanding are pseudo. So it's just kind of like a pendulum. You know, it's swinging back and forth, but I do think we are going to eventually find that balance. And I think it's really important that we have this conversation, you know, not just for the sake of this video, but for the sake of human evolution itself, because there is a healthy amount of skepticism that one can have for new information. That's called discernment. But outright denying and shutting down and even ridiculing any theory or ideology that contradicts your own or contradicts what you've been told goes against the basis of science itself. Because science is ultimately something that is ever evolving, right? And current concepts can be just as flawed as the humans who propose them. So for those who refuse to see beyond that are participating in a religion, whether they like to admit it or not. Because true science holds space for new concepts and ideas, while scientism doesn't. It holds space for concepts that can only be grasped using current tools, which is extremely elitist, and you know, these people are really no better than the religious zealots that they bitch about. But that's tea. I just ask at the very least that you keep an open mind whilst receiving this information. You know, I also encourage you to do your own research as well. And I'll be listing some helpful resources down below, some books, some websites, all of that stuff that you can look into. because, you know, the information in this video is simply the tip of the iceberg. I'm not claiming to know everything. I'm not claiming to have it all figured out. This is simply just what I've concluded based on my own channelings and my own research. But once again, it's the tip of the iceberg. Don't be afraid to dig deeper and develop your own personalized understanding of this information and this knowledge that I'm sharing with you. A great example of a reliable account was from Herodotus, who is also known as the father of history. He visited Memphis, Egypt in 485 BC. And he recalls being taken to these vast underground vaults where he was shown rows upon rows of statues of former kings. And these statues stretched as far as the eye could see. There were so many of them. He was specifically shown these wood carvings of kings who had apparently been born from one to the other. In other words, they apparently reproduced asexually by means of parthenogenesis. In fact, the story of Genesis itself is a subjective account of how humanity evolved from a plant state to an animal state, with the entwining snake around the tree representing the formation of the spine and the central nervous system. And the consumption of the fruit of knowledge of good and evil represents the development of the linear dualistic thought process that comes with having a mind. Before all of this, humans lacked not only the physical body in the form that we know today, but they lacked a more important quality: the mind and individual self-awareness. Proto-humans were pretty much mindless and senseless. You know, the mind and egoic nature wasn't really introduced until a little bit later by beings known in theosophy as Lords of the Flame. But they go by many other names. So they're considered to be the fathers of the mind, according to mystery schools. And this is kind of what the Bible is alluding to when Adam and Eve become aware of their nudity. It was the implementation of self-consciousness, not from a god, but from a much higher life form with the ability to manipulate human DNA. And the secret history that's discussed in mystery schools teaches that evolution itself is an organic form of genetic engineering, where the technology upgrades itself based on its environment, aka our incredible ability to adapt. That's technology. Even Madame Blavatsky's depiction of early Lemurian humans, she claims that they were jelly-like and that they had bones that would have most likely resembled the bones of a fish. So, she claims that the modern bone structure of man didn't really develop until Atlantean society came about, which is quite interesting considering cultures across the planet have mythologies in relation to these fish beings. A perfect example was, the god Jupiter was, in his earliest depictions, a fish being. Jupiter also once ruled over Pisces. If you're into astrology, Jupiter once was the ruling planet over the sign of Pisces, and the zodiac sign of Pisces is symbolized by a fish. Another example is the birth of Horus, which is kind of the tale of the birth of animal life to the ancient Egyptians. And the earliest depictions of Horus were much like Jupiter, half man, half fish. A great example that's pretty well known is the Dogon tribe in Mali. They have these cave paintings of beings that they refer to as Nomo, which are described as being fish-like. And I'll put a picture of what I'm talking about right here so you can kind of see. They appear to be plan view, so it kind of alludes to this idea that these beings have opposed tails more like a dolphin versus lateral tails like a fish. And another dolphin-like feature is that their heads are above water, kind of alluding to the idea that the Nomo were air-breathing. There's a lot of information out there that kind of ties in to this ideology. You just have to pay really close attention and you just have to know what you're looking at, right? Because if you don't, then all of this stuff is just going to be seemingly random. But there's no such thing as random. Like, everything has its place, especially in history and especially in mythos. This information that I'm sharing with you guys in this video is the information that's taught to the initiates of secret societies, the Rosicrucians, the Masons, and not like low-tier Masons. I'm talking like deep, high-level initiates. Many of these initiates possessing some of the greatest minds that the world has ever seen. These people weren't just magically blessed with genius. They were, through this knowledge, accessing the godhood that is present within all of us. It's present within all sentient beings. There are, however, certain lineages that are predisposed to this ability because it is a skill. So it's kind of like, people who are naturally good at playing the piano. Some people are naturally good at playing soccer. Some people are naturally good at singing. And some people are naturally good at connecting to source. I think it's also important to note that it wasn't uncommon for these occult geniuses to be perceived as crazy by their contemporaries. Nikola Tesla being a perfect example, and probably one of the most famous examples, because genius and madness are in the same realm of existence. You know, it's a spectrum, you could say, because tapping into these realms can be dangerous if you have no idea what the fuck you're doing and you have no, previous knowledge of what you're tapping into. And I honestly think that kind of ties into the idea of like schizophrenia and stuff like that. But that's a topic for a whole other video as well. If you lack the logical ability and the eloquence to ground your channelings into the material realm to be understood by those around you, you will be perceived as crazy. So, there is an element of balance that's necessary in order to express these channelings and in order to be, perceived correctly and perceived as a genius versus perceived as a loony. And it all just depends on your ability to, once again, ground your channelings into the material to be understood by those around you. So that's kind of like the gist of this information. This is just like a little video that I wanted to create and share with you guys. Once again, like I've been working on this video for almost 4 months because I've been working on this since the summer. I've been doing research, I've been reading books, I've been, looking into all kinds of topics. Information has kind of just been finding me as well. I've channeled my own information about this. So this is all just a compilation of my personalized understanding of this information. And I, once again, encourage you to do your own research and to develop your own understanding, because that's ultimately how you're going to really connect with this information, is if you develop your own personal understanding of it. Don't just take what I'm saying at face value. Of course, like if certain things resonate, great. I'm happy to know that certain things are resonating with you. But I encourage you to look deeper. I encourage you to find your own knowledge, even things that I didn't talk about in this video, because there's so much to say on this topic. There's so much to say. But I kind of wanted to just get your feet wet a little bit so that you can now maybe have a piqued interest and potentially look into it yourself. But that is the conclusion of this vlog. Thank you so much for being present with me. Goodbye.